Zoos help endangered animals reproduce so they can be released back into the wild. But zoos can affect animals both mentally and physically. Zoos protect animals from being poached in the wild. Zoos are home to many injured wildlife and teach people about conservation, although animals typically have a lower life expectancy and aren't provided the habitat that they need to flourish. Animals can find refuge in zoos and be protected from predators. Injured or endangered wildlife are protected in zoos. This means they can't be shot, killed, or eaten humans shoot them to eat them for food. Injured or endangered wildlife are protected in zoos. Zoos offer a safe home for wildlife where their well-being and health are cared for. This means zoos provide animals with what they need, such as food, a diet, and the nutrients they need. Animals in zoos are provided with look-alike habitats that look like the native habitats that they are comfortable with. So say you have a polar bear that's from a cold environment. When they would come into the zoo, they would have habitats that would have water and that they can go swimming in, and it'd be colder than a climate for something that's from the desert or Africa. Zoos help replenish endangered wildlife. Zoos have revived the population of golden lions, Arabian orchids, and many other animals. This is from Ganzert. In 1982, the last Arabian oryx was shot that was in the wild. Zoos help replenish Arabian orchids through breeding programs. This means that zoos would get a male and a female oryx together, and they'd put them in captivity, and they would breed them. Now, there are 1,000 oryx living in the wild, when at time there was just one oryx left in the wild. So what happened is, there was 9 oryx left in the entire world, and zoos brought them together into these breeding programs where they would reproduce, and now there's over 1,000 oryxes living in the wild, which is pretty crazy and a staggering number. Zoos affect animals both mentally and physically. Animals in zoos are subjected to abuse. According to Bakari, visitors are a source of discomfort to animals and treat them as objects. Now, what I mean by this, so as humans, we walk through zoos and look at animals, and animals are very discomforted by that. According to Draven, polar bear environments are typically 1 million times smaller than the area they would have in the wild. So say a polar bear has 1 million acres in the wild. In a zoo, it would only have 1 acre, which provides them with not even in the close amount of space to what they are used to and what they should be receiving. Next, we're going to talk about how zoos are considered to be prison for animals. Animals in zoos act unnatural to how they would in the wild. Animals in zoos are seen to have neurotic behaviors. According to Draven, these behaviors are repetitive pacing, swaying, and bar biting. So if you've ever been to a zoo, I'm sure you have, the lion, they'll pace back and forth, and that's what they'll do the entire time. With small cages and unfamiliar sights, animals are continually stressed. Animals are cramped in these tiny locations. They are transported from zoo to zoo. They see unfamiliar things they're used to seeing in the wild. And they don't like humans. They don't like us up close to them. They don't like us walking around them and letting us touch them and see them in zoos. This is very disrespectful from humans, and animals are not comfortable with it. Next, we're going to talk about how animals and zoos bring in money and teach people about animals. Zoos are used for research and to teach the youth. Animals were first kept in zoos to research animal behavior and the anatomy of animals. So back in the late 1800s, zoos were first occurring, and they would bring animals into zoos so people could study them, learn more about them, and learn about animals. According to Bakari, zoos provide the public with cheap entertainment at the cost of animals. Zoos aren't expensive. I believe to go in the Omaha Zoo when I was younger, it was $20, $30 for an entire day. And there was numerous things to do there. Now, this is cheap entertainment, and this is putting our lives at risk and animals. Animals in zoos have killed people and zoos have killed animals. It goes both ways. Zoos offer anything from swimming with dolphins to petting tigers, riding sharks, and kissing sharks. This is from Draven. Now, if you've ever been to a zoo, you may have done these things, but if you've ever watched the show Tiger King, that shows a representation of people petting tigers. These little tigers would be on people's laps, and they'd be petting them. And this is not how animals are supposed to be grown into an older age. They're supposed to be out in the wild, roaming with unlimited space and all the food they could have. Although the idea of swimming with dolphins or petting a tiger is very cool, it's very damaging to the wildlife. This is from Draven. So this just means that humans are affected from doing these things to animals. These are experiences humans are not supposed to interact with. They aren't supposed to be petting tigers, swimming with dolphins. And animals aren't supposed to interact with humans that way. Animals and humans are supposed to be one and one with nature and go along their boundaries. The difference between zoos and reserves. What is a reserve and how does it differ between zoos and reserves? According to Stanley, game reserves are large areas of land whose ecosystems are native species and they are protected. So animals in in reserves have a wide array of land. They're with their native ecosystem. Nothing is set to look like their ecosystem in the zoo. In a reserve, they have unlimited space and they are protected from animals. Like zoos, animals are protected in reserves from legal hunting, but legal hunts are still regulated. So my example for this is think about South Dakota. In South Dakota, animals, they are still protected in reserves, but you can hunt in reserves earlier. And people own reserves. So, for example, in the pheasant industry, people own reserves and they put their own pheasants on for people to hunt. But the government opens up reserves early, so these people that own the reserves can bring people in to hunt on them. In conclusion, zoos both have their positives and their benefits. The positives to zoos are keeping animals in a protected area, educating the youth, educating us as humans. The negatives are the limited space that animals are given. They aren't receiving the right nutrients in some ways. And animals in zoos, they can be subjected to abuse. Zoos protect animals from their natural predators and replenish the wild with their breeding programs. Breeding programs help bring exotic animals back out into the wild where they belong. But they don't provide animals with the space they need and mentally affect animals, exposing animals to the public in unfamiliar terrain. They aren't used to what they are given in zoos. How much effect does limited space have on animals? And do you think animals are better off in the wild or in the protection of zoos? Thank you.